You got a text that felt off, and within 30 seconds, you had already lost your job. Your relationship was over. Everyone you knew had turned against you. Nothing had happened yet, but your brain had already run the simulation. This isn't anxiety. This isn't weakness. This isn't overthinking. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. And the reason nobody ever told you, here's something nobody told you. Your brain was never designed to make you feel good. It was designed to keep you alive. And those are not the same thing. Every system inside your skull was built for one purpose: survival, not happiness, not accuracy, not peace of mind, survival. This means your brain has a fundamental bias built into its architecture. It pays more attention to threats than to anything else. A reward gets processed, a threat gets amplified. Neuroscientists call this negativity bias, and it isn't a malfunction. It's the most successful survival strategy in the history of the species. In 1998, John Cacioppo, Jeff Larsen, and Kyle Smith at the University of Chicago made something clear. Negative stimuli hit the brain harder than positive ones, faster, more deeply, more thoroughly. Published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, the finding changed how scientists understood human attention. Your brain literally processes bad news faster than good news. It dwells on it longer. It encodes it deeper. An opportunity missed feels smaller than a danger approaching. Every time. This isn't pessimism, this is engineering. But here's where it gets strange. Your brain doesn't just notice threats, it projects them forward in time. It takes a small signal, a tone in a text, a look from your boss, a moment of silence in a conversation, and it builds a story, a complete narrative about what that signal means, where it leads, what happens next. Psychologists call this catastrophizing, and it happens automatically, beneath conscious awareness, before you've had a chance to decide whether to worry or not. By the time you notice you're spiraling, you're already 3 steps into a future that doesn't exist yet. Here's why. Your brain has a region called the amygdala. It's roughly the size and shape of an almond, and it's been doing the same job for 300 million years, scanning your environment for danger and triggering a response before your conscious mind even knows what happened. The amygdala doesn't wait for complete information. It doesn't weigh probabilities. It acts on fragments, on patterns, on anything that even slightly resembles a previous threat. A slightly short reply from someone you care about, a meeting request with no subject line, a friend who didn't laugh at your joke. These are not threats, but they are patterns, and your amygdala doesn't know the difference. You feel it before you think it. Your stomach tightens, your jaw clenches, something shifts in your chest before a single conscious thought is formed. That's the amygdala, already 3 moves ahead, already building the case for why this is dangerous. And it does this fast, faster than language, faster than reason. The signal fires and the story starts before you've had a single moment to decide whether any of it is true. There's something even deeper happening here. When your brain runs a catastrophic simulation, it doesn't label it as fiction. It experiences it as possibility. And possibility to your nervous system is close enough to reality to trigger a full threat response. Your heart rate climbs, your muscles tighten, cortisol floods your bloodstream. You're not responding to what happened. You're responding to what your brain imagined might happen. And here's what makes it worse. Stress hormones, specifically cortisol, don't just respond to the threat. They actively narrow your thinking. They reduce access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought, perspective, and proportion. So the more anxious you become about the spiral, the less able you are to stop it. Stanford neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky documented this across 30 years of research, culminating in his 2004 work, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. When cortisol levels spike, the brain prioritizes speed over accuracy. It stops asking, is this actually dangerous? And starts asking, what's the worst case scenario so I can prepare for it? Which means your brain, under stress, is specifically designed to think of the worst possible outcome, not the most likely one, or not pessimism, engineering. And this is the part that most people never reach, because by the time they're asking why they spiraled, the spiral is already over, but the damage is done. The story your brain told it felt real, and part of you still believes it. But here's the part that changes everything. This system worked perfectly for 300,000 years. In a world where threats were physical, immediate, and real, a sound in the dark, a stranger approaching, a food supply running low. In that world, overreacting saved your life. The ancestor who assumed the rustling in the bushes was a predator survived. The one who stopped to think about probabilities did not. Your brain is that ancestor's brain, running in a world it was never built for. The threats have changed completely. No, or the hardware hasn't. And think about what that actually means. Every notification, every unanswered message, every awkward silence. Your brain is processing these through the same system that once scanned the dark for predators. The intensity is identical, only the trigger has changed. A text message cannot kill you. A meeting with no subject line is not a predator. A friend's silence is not rejection from the tribe. But your brain doesn't know that. It was never updated. It received the signal, matched it to a pattern, and launched the full catastrophe sequence because in the environment it evolved for, that was the correct response. You're not broken. You're running ancient software on a modern problem, and the mismatch between what your brain was built for and what it now has to deal with is exactly what turns small problems into disasters. So what actually works? Not positive thinking, not telling yourself to calm down, not reminding yourself that everything is probably fine, because by the time you're in the spiral, your prefrontal cortex is already offline. Logic doesn't reach you there. What works is interrupting the physical response before the cognitive spiral can complete. In 2014, psychologist Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan published research on a technique called distanced self-talk. Instead of asking, why am I so anxious? You ask, why is your name so anxious? Referring to yourself in the third person creates a small but measurable gap between you and the threat response. It activates the prefrontal cortex. It gives your rational brain just enough room to re-enter the conversation. It sounds too simple, but that's the point. The amygdala hijacks you through speed. The third person slows the process down by just enough to let reason back in. The second technique is what neuroscientists call a pattern interrupt. Your brain catastrophizes through a predictable sequence. If you can disrupt the sequence early before the cortisol spike, the spiral doesn't complete. The most effective way to do this is physical. A change in posture, a change in environment, a breath held for 4 seconds and released for 8. Not because breathing is magic, but because your nervous system cannot maintain a full threat response while your body is sending signals of physical safety. You're not thinking your way out, you're signaling your way out. Your brain turned a small problem into a disaster today, and it will do it again tomorrow. Not because something is wrong with you, because something is very right with you evolutionarily speaking. You inherited a brain that kept your ancestors alive for 300,000 years by always preparing for the worst. The problem isn't the system. The problem is the gap between a brain built for one world and a life being lived in another. Most people spend their whole lives fighting the spiral, blaming themselves for it, calling it anxiety, calling it weakness, never realizing it was always survival. But now you know what's actually happening inside you when the spiral starts. Knowing doesn't stop the sequence, but it changes your relationship to it. Instead of being swept into a story you didn't write, you can watch it form, you can name it, you can see it for what it is. A system doing its job in the wrong century. And that small gap between the trigger and the story your brain tells about it, that's where everything changes. Because you've been turning small problems into disasters your entire life without ever knowing why. Oddly explained.